record to the. Okay, I think you have to approve it, and then we can go forward. Did it ask you?
Yeah, I said yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Nancy. All right. So we'll just have a little bit more of a formal introduction to each other, since it's just the two of us. Typically, when we're doing a Herstory workshop, this isn't okay. So one of the things I want to start by saying is there are going to be some things that are like every Herstory workshop in the interaction that we have today. And then there are going to be some things that are different because it's two of us. Typically in the Herstory workshops that I've led, we have anywhere from 4 people to 17 people, and like at one time in the meeting. And so it will go differently. But the way I'm basically going to run you through the same kind of at least schedule that we do with the method as we normally would, but there'll probably just be more interchange between the two of us because we don't have to go around to everyone and we're not getting all of that experience. So right. I want you to have that experience. And one of the things I guess that I plan to say in the introduction, and I know I said it in the email, was that Janelle and I lead another workshop on a very similar topic. So many institutional narratives are part of that workshop. It's called Memoirs to Reimagine Mental Health Care. And it's for and it's for people that have had psychiatric experience. And that has been going on for 2.5 years. We meet on Wednesdays from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. So we have a really strong group there going that we've been working with people like you and like me who have some kind of psychiatric experience. But a lot of the people in the workshop are not necessarily wanting to be recorded and be part of this project for various reasons that they have. So we certainly presented it. And I just kind of want to begin by thanking you because you, like me, are one of the people who has, for whatever reason, your course of life and yourself have caused you to make a decision to sort of be public about your story and be willing to speak about it. And to tell you the truth, I don't think things will change unless more people can and are willing to do that. So I just want to I said it in my email, but I want to say it again that I haven't met you yet, but I have a great deal of respect for you already. For being willing to just come here as yourself and talk with me. On that note, I want to share with you that I'm someone who identifies as a psychiatric survivor, which I think it indicates that I don't like psychiatry, that I've had really negative experiences with psychiatry. I also, the reason that Shouting Through the Walls, memoirs about psychiatric incarceration, how this kind of began, I'm going to take you on a little bit of my journey and then I'm going to get to know you.
Okay.
Maybe 3.5 years ago, I was a fellow with Herstory Writers Network. And I was one of their graduate fellows in a training program so that I can do the work that I'm doing right now with you. And we went through the exact method that you're going to do today with me. And so I got to be trained essentially and then become the trainer. That's sort of how it works. And I was asked to think of a moment if I had to, and I'm going to talk to you more about this in a bit, but if I was asked to bring a stranger reader into any, really important moment of my life that I thought was going to grip their attention and, help them to care about the issues that I care about, because we're doing agenda-based writing. So that means that everything that we're going to talk about today is like, we've got something behind it that we want to see happen or change, in our lives, in the world, and the systems that we've had interactions with. And the story I told in that, which I'm going to tell you about a little later, was about my psychiatric experience. So I want to begin by saying I've been incarcerated. Not a lot of people use that word. One time during a divorce trial, I was asked by the judge, I used that term somehow and when I was speaking in my testimony, and she stopped me and she said, incarceration, are you talking about hospitalization? So and I said, yes, that's what I'm talking about. And she said, well, I just wanted to clarify that you haven't been incarcerated. And so we had the two senses of the word that I was using it. So I was using it in a broader definitional sense, right? Like incarceration to me is like, you can't leave somewhere. You are sort of brought in by a carceral system, and you can't leave that carceral system. The way she was using it was, have you been convicted of a crime? Have you been incarcerated in a more traditional prison? So a lot of this, I ever since my experience being institutionalized, I immediately could feel that I was criminalized, that I was having a carceral experience, that this wasn't just, oh, I have a headache and I'm at the doctor, or, oh, someone's worried about me and they're taking me to a memory care facility, or whatever it was, right? It was definitely like, you are in trouble. You're really bad. And now we're going to take you to this place where we take bad people, and like, and it's a terrible place and you can't leave, and we can do what we want with you. So that's sort of how I'm using the term carceral. But when I joined the Herstory facilitator training, I don't think anyone in the training that I met had ever heard someone using it that way and referring to psychiatry that way and having a psychiatric experience that way. So I told a story because my agenda started to shape as on the spot.
Right.
Because I was started to think about like, oh, well, what do I want people to understand? You know, one of the things I want people to understand is just, first of all, how painful carceral experiences can be, which anyone who's had one might be able to relate to in some way. But also to get people to care about that pain, like, and want to change the system. But then also to see that psychiatric experiences are painful and carceral, and like, why should they be that? We're calling it a mental health care system, yet we are brought there, and for many of us there is great pain in what we're, in the care that the care in quotes that we're receiving. So it was through the story that I told there that I guess I did what the Herstory mission is, which is to open hearts and minds. And I sort of, with the people I was working with, they started to see, maybe through my shared story, my memoir, the power of the memoir was that people that were hearing the story were like starting to think about how other carceral experiences really are related in ways that maybe if they haven't been inside the system receiving it, they wouldn't have known. So it was through this story, actually, through a memoir, and the power of the memoir to change hearts and minds, I guess I would say, that we became included in this project. So the project Writing Beyond the Prison, Reimagining the Carceral Ecosystem with Incarcerated Authors, is not my project. I didn't like come up with that and lead that project. It's a project that Herstory is doing. And they, because of my story, thought of, oh, carceral experiences, but people with psychiatric experiences have carceral experiences. But that never would have happened if my story hadn't sort of made that apparent to the people who had heard it, who now included us in this project, and then they had to appeal to the people funding the project to say, will you count this in your definition of carceral? And they were convinced, and they did.
Oh, wow.
I sort of beginning with that story because not to say, oh, my story is so moving. It's about the power of actually the memoirs that are crafted with the Herstory method, and that they really can sort of they can affect people in the way they see things. So on that note, I am a psychiatric survivor. I was institutionalized in 2017 when I was 32 years old. And it was definitely the most traumatic experience of my life. And I had never had any kind of psychiatric experience before that. And I knew when I was there, and these are all stories that certainly could be told in memoir, but I knew when I was there, actually sitting in those horrible chairs, those horrible plastic chairs, in the communal room, whatever you would call it. And my sister was visiting with me, and she was sitting in one of the chairs too, and we were sort of sitting knee to knee. And she was coming to deliver the news to me that I had lost my job because I wasn't showing up because I was in this institution and couldn't leave. And it was a small job. It was a job in a theater as I was doing stage management. But she, she had to come and deliver that news to me, which was like on top of everything that I was going through.
Wow.
And, the two of us just cried on each other's, we're facing each other in the seats, like head to head, shoulder to shoulder on these plastic chairs, only having a little time together before she has to leave. And she tells me, "I'm sorry, Jess, they told me they had to let you go because they have to get someone else to do the show." And it was, that crushing feeling of, I'm totally powerless. This is ruining my life. Like the work that I'm trying to do, all of it, my work associations, my professional associations are crumbling. And, she was right in there in that. And, she said, she was trying to comfort me. And she said, whatever, when I get out, when you get out of here, I will do whatever whatever you want me to do to help you. And like the one thing that I could find comfort in was that I was going to do something, that I had been in the system, and that she had seen it, and that it was so horrible, and that I never knew that it was like this, although I suspected, and that I would be able to get out and tell other people about it. Now, the issue is, now, we started an organization together called Mad Women in the Attic, and that was the product of that moment. But the thing is that I had no idea what could be, it was like, would anyone listen to me anymore? Because now I've been psychiatrized.
Right.
Now I've been called crazy. Now I've been labeled insane, so
Right.
when I get out of here, I want to do something, but have I lost my personhood? Have I lost my narrative, autonomy? Have I lost my credibility, my reputation? Will I be able to do the work? And, it's been a struggle. It's definitely a struggle. It's a mark on you. And it shouldn't have to be, receiving care shouldn't have to be a mark on you for the rest of your life that renders you a social aberration. So I just tell you that because, we're going to share brave stories here, and I don't know any of your experiences. I just know, like, as soon as, if you came to this workshop called Shouting Through the Walls, we probably have something in common. So I want to share that with you. I'm a mom of two teenage girls who are 13 and 15. I'm divorced. I'm with them during the summers and holidays, so I'm not with them all the time. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Buffalo, which meets on the Seneca Nation lands of the Haudenosaunee people. And this is the work that I do. I'm really passionate about it. And the work that I've done with Herstory has really, truly changed my life, because I believe in the narratives of the writers who come together. So this other workshop that Janelle, who you met, and I lead, the stories are so important. Every time I hear one, I'm like, oh my gosh, these need readers. Now, we're culturally at a time in the United States, I believe, where reading is becoming a different kind of thing. And reading creative writing it's a hard sell right now for some reason. So I'm really like, my quest is like, find readers, because I think when you actually sit down, if someone sits down and hears your story and takes the time to listen and care, they will be changed. They will be affected. So I really believe in it. So if you have any questions about me, feel free to ask, but I also would just love to get to know whatever you want to share about you right now. Just introduce yourself. But also, we're on a recording, so whatever.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly need to run and get my charger so I don't die. So I'll be right back.
Take your time.
So sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. That's the thing. I mean, we're doing the recording, so it has a little bit more of a formal feel, but typically when we are meeting, you see that I'm in. You
can cut this part out.
I know, I'm sure they will, but yeah, I'm meeting here. I'm in my bedroom because this is also my office, and I've grown comfortable just like getting on with people and being like, yes, that's my bed in the background, and this is life and this is where I am. So before I would disguise it, I would kind of like, I put it this way, but that's not how my desk works and it's quite uncomfortable. So I'm just going to be in the space that I'm in. So yes,
That's great.
please tell me about yourself, whatever you'd like to share.
Okay. So, I, oh, I don't know where to start. I was, I've been a psych patient. I'm 67 and I've been a psych patient, since, 1976, I think was my first, being in a psych hospital.
Yes.
Um, uh, um, so, uh, so, I was part of, either an inpatient or a day hospital patient,
Okay.
for a long time, in a Mennonite, mental, facility in Newton, Kansas.
Okay.
And, I went to Kansas to, I went to Newton to be a part of a communal, church, a Mennonite church where we lived together and did common treasury and stuff like that.
Okay.
That happened in 76. And during that time, the church, thought that I needed some reparenting, which we know is very bad to do, but at the time they didn't. And, um, I was a young adult then when, they thought that I needed to relearn some stuff. And, that experience, really screwed me up. Um,
Um,
it's screwed me up. It made me dependent. It made me, uh, it made me, at one point I could only relate to one woman, and so that messed me up. When all of a sudden the family role ended and I hadn't learned how to relate to a father or how to relate to, and it was, looking back, it was kind of scary,
yeah.
where my head went, because to me it wasn't a role and to them it was just a role. And
Yeah.
so, it really was devastating because of that, um, experience. Of course, I left the church and, um, came back to Colorado, and and um, and I had, a family. I had a family history of, mental illness. Um, Now I know that my aunts were not crazy. They were just traumatized. And back in those days, you could stick them in a psych hospital forever.
Forever.
And so, but growing up, it was always, if you don't straighten up, you're going to end up like your aunts. And so that was, something that was grained into me. So the first time I went to a state hospital setting, I liked what you talked about, how, the day room and the chairs, and yeah, that's an awful memory too. And so because of that, um, I went back to Kansas because I wanted to be a part of the church. Even though they screwed up my life, that's all I knew. I wanted to go back to the
Yeah.
church. And
Yeah.
so I came back and it was all different. There was no more communal living. The singles had all got married. Families had moved out into regular housing. No more common treasury. It was totally different.
Yeah.
At that time, they knew that they, made a horrible mistake with me, and They wouldn't name it, of course, but they knew, and they wanted me to go to Prairie View, which was at the time a Mennonite psych hospital, and I don't know if they still do, but um, the Mennonites had these hospitals all over the United States.
Right.
And so I was either a day patient or an inpatient for about 2 years.
Okay.
In 1986, I call it the worst thing that ever happened to my life. I was um, I was not taken, but I was told that I needed to go to a place like Kaufman House. If you want to look that up,
What is it? What is it called?
it's called Kaufman House. You would Google it on Arlen, Arlan, Kaufman, Kaufman.
Okay.
If you look up him, you might have to put his name and his wife's name, Linda.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so anyway, I got sent to that house. What you need to know about Newton is that it is either people working for the schools or working on the railroad, or in North Newton is all the Mennonite. Okay, they have a Mennonite college called Bethel College. Um, the lots of Mennonite churches, the hospitals, both hospitals, the physical and the psych was all ran by Mennonites. Okay, that's an important part of my story. So I got sent by my church and by Prairie View to this house called Kaufman House. And what that was supposed to do at the time was um, give me that sense of household that I was missing, because I would be living with people my own age in a household and stuff like that. It was not 24-hour staff. It was not. It okay. When I use the word, yeah, I need to clarify this. When I use the word crazy, I'm talking about me and my friends in a loving way.
Okay.
So I had there was 12 crazy folks, um, adults, living in this old 2-story rundown house. Um, we had what Arlen Kaufman would call group therapy. He was a PhD in social work.
Okay.
Linda was an RN. So Linda would do our meds and our medical stuff and take us to our appointments. Arlen would do group therapy and stuff like that. Uh, when I say the room, seclusion room, most people think of a seclusion room in a hospital and how that looks like.
Right.
Kaufman's did not have a seclusion room anyway like that. It was a uh, horrible, um, dingy orange shag carpet. Uh, you sat on that. He would take your clothes off, or he would at least let you have your underwear on. Um, it was not ran like a regular seclusion room where you got checked every 15 minutes.
Right.
It wasn't ran like you had to get a doctor's order to even put the person in there.
Right.
No one knew, no one knew that Coffin House had this room.
Okay. I get the.
So when when it was the worst thing that happened to my life when I had a chance to tell my church what was going on. They didn't believe me. In fact, they went to Kaufman's to see if what I was saying was true.
Oh God.
Um,
Yeah.
I would um, I was allowed for a few months to go to Prairie View to continue to see my therapist there. And every time I would tell my therapist about what was going on at Kaufman House, um, the other thing about Kaufman House is that Linda would not hand out psych meds like you would in a regular hospital. She would just put them out in, well, back then they didn't have those wonderful pill compartments they do now. And she would put them in old fishing tackle boxes, plastic, and put your name on it and just put the pills in each day. But there was no lid, okay? And she wasn't, of course, handing them to you. So the 12 of us could take whatever we wanted or not take whatever we wanted. And of course she wouldn't know until there started to be quote symptoms.
Right.
And and so I would tell my therapist these things, and he just would tell me I just needed to trust Kaufman and stuff like that. Um, So, to make a long story short, so I was in there for a year, horrible experiences. Um, I got when I got out, um, and a friend of mine died in the house. Then I wanted to fight. I I um, I was looking for an ombudsman for mental health, and in Kansas they didn't have one, and so you had to talk to SRS, the social department, um, and I shared with them what was happening, and of course, when after you do that, um, you have to fight to find out what if they're checking into it and stuff like that.
Right.
And a week later, I I was not the most appropriate person in Dylan's grocery store that day, but I saw the person I had told, and I wanted to know what she found out, and she gave me a phone number and she said, "You call this number and you will know what we know." Well, long story short, he was not licensed at all
Okay.
to have a treatment house like this.
Right.
So um, I just, yeah, I came home and there was also a letter from my insurance company saying that they were not going to pay me because he did not have a doctor over him that was supervising and signing off on things. And so I ran to my church first to show them. They still didn't believe me. I I um I ran to Prairie View and showed them, and they said that that must be a mistake. So, to make a long story short, I got very, very, very sick. I mean, um, I thought I was sick before, but I was really sick. I had a lot of trauma. I mean, now I know it was trauma, but back then they didn't want to recognize it as trauma, and so um, and we never talked about it. Prairie View would never talk to me about it. If I brought it up, they would say, "That's not your problem. Your problem is this, this, and this."
Oh,
So uh, I had to wait 18 years
wow.
to finally be believed and vindicated. And I was the first victim who testified at a federal court hearing. After that, I went to the state, Kansas State House, and my friend and I got a law passed that this type of thing could never happen again, because the SRS, the people that was supposed to protect us, well, everyone that was supposed to protect me didn't, or didn't protect my friends, and because they would tell people they couldn't go there, they couldn't uh, they couldn't do anymore. SRS said. So it wasn't the state who got Kaufman closed down. It was the PAMI program. I don't know if you've ever heard of the PAMI program, but every state has a PAMI program, which stands for protective and advocacy for those with mental illness.
Okay.
They have one in every state, and they have statutes that can go in, and they can go in and get people out, and that's what they did. But anyway, for 18 years, why I waited for something to happen. Um, um, so,
So like in terms of the timeline, 18 years later, how old are you at that time?
oh man, are you good with math?
No.
Let's see. Um, okay. Um, I was born in 1956, and this happened in 2005,
Okay.
2006.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's not okay. I know I hate to say I'm like, oh, that's not long ago. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's like 20 years ago almost.
Yeah, yeah, it was a long time ago, and it's been a long time since, but a lot has happened since then. But anyway, I went to the state house. Um, it was the first time I ever heard the word recovery. Um, uh, I saw a group of crazy people like me doing wonderful things with each other and having conferences with each other, and I got really excited, and then I became a certified peer specialist trainer, and taking the training started to change my life from a victim to a survivor to to an advocate, and I even went to Washington D.C. in 2015, I think it was, to do a subcommittee hearing um, uh, because they wanted to defund the PAMI program. And the PAMI program is, um, if it hadn't been for PAMI, Kaufman probably would still be running the house.
Right.
I got a job being director of a peer ran organization in Newton,
Okay.
two
Wow.
blocks away from the house.
Wow.
Um, and just recently, I got to walk through the house after 35 years. Um, that was a very powerful moment, because you can put up walls and you can change it, paint it, whatever. But the horror that happened to me and my friends in that house still remained. And so when I shut the door as I was leaving, the house. I named every person that went through that house and told them they were free. Um, and that did something to me. I mean, that did something to my brain, my body. It was such a freedom. And then the biggest thing besides that I did recently was I confronted Prairie View for not believing me.
Yes.
Um, and that what I needed from them was them to do what they taught me, and that was accountability. And um, I needed them uh, to apologize. I needed them because I had all the proof. I mean, I had my old records that proved I had told them all this stuff. Um,
Did they respond to you, or did they stonewall you, or ignore you?
well, they lawyered up and
Right.
would not talk to me.
Oh,
Um,
right. All right. That's
you
the,
know, yeah,
yeah.
they lawyered up, and then when I sent them a copy of some federal person that I know, telling him that there was no way that I could sue them or do anything like that to them.
Okay.
That so they don't have to worry.
Oh,
Um and
shouldn't have to be like that though. That's so wrong.
yeah,
But
and
yeah.
so luckily one of the people in the administration met with me,
Okay.
and my friend Jason, who has a website called a Mennonite Abuse Project, or I don't know what the P stands for.
Okay.
I had been working with him for years to get Kaufman's story on their website,
Oh,
and so he went with me to explain to this person how all this is thickly connected,
yeah.
um, and how here's another incident where a Mennonite person does something horrible, and the Mennonites don't worry about the victims; they worry about the person who did it.
Right.
And so it was. I got an apology from her, which meant a lot to me because um, because she was a trauma therapist for children.
Yes.
And so she just kept on shaking her head and saying, I know you wasn't a child, but for these people not to believe you or even check it out, how awful. And so um, I've done a lot of work um, to get over I had horrible trauma triggers that just bothered me. Um, and I didn't have words for it for
Yeah.
years. And
Yeah.
then when I had words for it, they wanted to medicate me. and so I wouldn't talk. And so in 2013, I decided to write a book.
Okay.
I wanted the person who had followed the trial to write it with me, but he wanted to what's that word where you make it?
Sensationalized?
Yeah,
Sensationalized? Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't want that. I just wanted the truth out there.
Right.
And so my friend who had never written a book, I had never written a book, did a self-publishing book. It's called The Girl Who Cried Wolf. Um, but then since this book came out and I've done lots of speaking engagements. Oh, I guess I should say I also got an award, the Voice Award from SAMHSA.
Oh,
Um,
good.
uh, that happened in 2006 or seven after we the after we got the after we got the state to pass the law that if SRS got a report and they couldn't do anything or wouldn't do anything, they had to send it um, to the someplace else to have eyes to instead of saying, see, for 12 years, okay, for well until they got caught, which was in 2005 to like 2000 I'm sorry, 1980 five. So from 1985 to 2005, there was 12 reports against the Kaufmans and
Uh,
how they were treating people. And four of those were former residents or current residents who and nothing was done. So that's kind of a nutshell. I'm
okay.
really I've done a lot of speaking engagements. I've done a lot of work helping uh, other people share their story, or at least uh, send them in the right direction to get the help they need. I do not believe in psych meds. Yes, I take a couple, but um, I'm getting off of them because the situation that put me in on them. I just don't believe in life term
Right.
psych meds.
Right.
I don't believe the stupid thing about uh, you have a chemical imbalance. Yeah, you do, and that's based on trauma. I believe that most mental illnesses are trauma based, and they never get to the trauma. Um, and so I do a lot of speaking about that. Um, I I I am in the process, and that's why this class is going to be so helpful and stuff for me, is because I'm in the process of writing my second book,
Yes.
and um, I really, I mean, my first book has done really good. Um, but when I would go speak at college classes or nursing classes, um, social work classes, um, I wrote down all the questions that was ever asked to me, and I want to answer them
Oh,
in this book.
okay.
Um, and since then, both of the Kaufmans have died. Um, she died because of a compassion release um, at home um, a few years ago, and he died in 20, 2021, or maybe it was during the virus, in prison. He had tried to get out of prison. Um, there's two of us left, Lynn and I, who gets letters um, and, asking us what we wanted when he tried to get out. And we
Mm.
said, no way. And so he um, died in prison. Less time than two people who lived the whole 24 years at Kaufman House being
Wow.
abused. So anyway, if you look up Kaufman, you can see more about it.
Yeah.
If you look up me, you can see more about it. If you wanted to read the book to get a little more about me, I didn't want the book to just be about Kaufman House. So I
Right.
talked about my mental health journey from being a kid all the way up to 2013. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so that's my story.
Okay. No, thank you so much for sharing that about all of that about yourself. I'm obviously very disturbed by everything that you've lived through, and I'm so sorry about all of these experiences. They are unspeakably horrible, and you're just giving me the kind of summary version of some of these really horrible experiences in your life. But you can see, when you're young and you become part of and I don't know enough about Mennonite cult, religion as a religion
Yeah,
to really know about it, but when you're traumatized at such a young age, it affects the shape of the course of your life and where you end
yeah,
up, and how people perceive you and how they treat you, and the issue of being believed, all of that. So I'm excited to be able to work with you, because what Herstory is doing is we work with a lot of writers who have very deeply traumatic experiences. So this workshop certainly sounds like we're going to gather together people who have had traumatic experiences, but there are many other workshops that Herstory does. And what Herstory has a little bit of a concept, which I'm going to be introducing you to a few concepts today. One of them is sort of about looking for the drama in writing about trauma. So the phrase, I think, is drama, not trauma, but because we're thinking as writers. So, there's you and me as human beings that carry trauma with us all our days. Okay. We live with it. But the act of writing memoir through methodologies that are helping it to be successful and seen, and to do all the things that you've been doing and want to keep doing, and is going to be about getting that reader to be really compelled and to care, like we talked about a little bit earlier on. Now, I introduced a concept to you a little while ago. I'm going to reintroduce it in a second here. But I was just your reader, essentially, in what you shared with me, right? I listened to all of your story. I am like your ideal reader, because I have the issues that you talked about. They get at me somehow, and they really appeal to my empathy, and I want to know more, and I want your story out there. I want you to talk forever. I could listen to you forever, because I really care about your story, because I'm already I that's just who I am, right? And the experiences that I have as a psychiatric survivor. But a stranger reader, that concept, it's a Herstory concept. It allows us to think about a reader that may or may not be the kind of reader we want, right? The kind of reader that we imagine in our idealized version of a reader, which is what's an ideal reader to you? If you're just gonna, like, you write your book, and who's the perfect reader of your book?
yeah. Okay. I think I know what you're saying. I wrote my first book and was hoping that other psychiatric people, other peers would read it, to realize that what they're going through is going to help someone else, if they would share their story too.
Right.
If nothing else, to know that you're not alone.
Okay.
I wanted it to go to social workers, people that work with us, to
Yeah.
understand some things.
Yeah.
Now, this second book, I want it to be more for any reader, any type of reader. Now, I didn't say, but they do. Wichita State University has a class called Literature in Madness, or Madness in Literature, something like
Oh,
that.
wonderful.
And they're using my book.
Oh my gosh, I love
And
it.
so there are some people that are just, I don't know how to say it,
Yeah.
general readers that have read my book, that took this class just because, they were English majors or something, and it has really, because like you said earlier, people who don't get stuck in the system don't know what the system's like.
Right. Right.
And so uh, they're either not believing you or they're in shock and awe. So
Yeah.
that I just want my stories to open people's eyes
Okay.
that the way the system is now
Yeah.
and how it's starting to go back to the old ages. Um, you know, some of the new laws in some states are horrible,
Yeah.
and so I want it to reach anybody.
Okay. So actually what you just did is an activity that I was going to kind of lead, but I'm going to still bring it up because what you
Okay,
just shared was your agenda that you have behind the stories that you want to tell. And so you shared that your agenda is, to reach, well, with your first book, your agenda was, I want to reach out to people who have had this experience and let them know they're not alone, and help to lead them to keep going and to tell their stories. And now you're talking about the sort of more general reader, which is really good with what I'm able to offer you and what Herstory is able to offer you. Because we like to begin by asking people to, if your words had the power to do anything in this world, what would you have them do? And for me, this is, sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's changing. But when I first did the workshop, and was going through my training, I believe I actually don't even know if I remember what I said, but with this workshop in mind, lately, I have been thinking, oh my gosh, I really, is it enough that I want people to actually read, and I want them to care about people who are in psychiatric settings, and to want to care enough that they start thinking differently and acting differently, and then also being willing to speak out and stand with people. Like there's all these elements, um, but also um being able to sort of humanize people that have been dehumanized, which I am among one of those people, right? So if my words had the power, it would get people to actually act, to act on conscience when they read about people that are being mistreated by systems, by unjust carceral systems. And like I'm going to reintroduce this idea of the stranger reader to you, because if I think about my agenda, which I shared with you, and I want to hear yours as well in a minute, um, if my goal is my agenda, if my words had the power, they would get people to act on their conscience, right? What then? My stranger reader could be, it could be you, right? Someone who's had an experience, and we can both be like, oh, we're together, we're unified, right? But you're not necessarily just the only audience I want to reach, because you're already acting,
right,
you're doing it, right? um but what if your stranger reader is a cop, right? Is a cop that takes people like cattle into psychiatric hospitals,
right,
dehumanizes them, has no emotion toward them, doesn't see them as human, um compartmentalizes people who are crazy, right? People who are mad, who are labeled in these ways. What if it's a cop? What if it's someone who works in that system? What if it's a doctor? What if it's a lawyer? What if it's someone who's part of an administration, like say the Mennonites in your case, or maybe a school administration in my case, who is sitting back and being told, don't listen to her, don't talk to her. We have our lawyers are telling us, don't interact at all. But if a reader is moved so much by a memoir or by a story that we're telling, that they are acting on conscience, then it might be, hey, guess what? I'm not going to just do as I'm told. I'm going to actually speak out. I'm going to cross the bridge and talk to the person who's begging or asking and pleading to be
right.
humanized and talked to, and not just stonewall them and not just dehumanize them and ignore them. So, that's what I'm really passionate about right now. For you, if your words had the power to do anything right now, what would you want them to do? This is open. This is your dream world. This is the perfect world. What would they do?
I would want to well, you brought cops, so that's where my head is. um I would want I know there's programs out there that is supposed to teach cops how to treat us.
Yes.
And you know, they're also trying to like the stupid 988. I want people who are making the rules, people who are deciding these great ways to change the system, to actually hear personal stories. Yes, in the cop training, they hear personal stories, but they don't. So I would want it to reach the people who like Congress or your
Attorney generals.
or your the city council, whatever, who makes these laws, thinking that they're helping us when they're really just traumatizing us and making our lives worse.
Yeah.
I would want to reach those type of people. I also would like to reach um, I would also like to really reach um, families or family members or significant others to realize the mental health system is no way like the medical system. And so they're not going to help your person like if you took them into a medical hospital. All they're going to do is medicate them and and diagnose them so they could get paid, not that they really care about the person. I mean, I want to hit everything.
So you want your memoir to reach a stranger reader, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You want it to be able to reach many different kinds of readers. And the Herstory method is designed to do that, to have the greatest impact. And it shapes how we write our memoirs. So this is the reason at the beginning you said, okay, I want to write this new book. I've written this old book. Should I share something? And we're actually doing an oral method of sort of coming up with memoirs. So we start with storytelling verbally through our work together. Instead of starting on the page and going, and then sharing, we start through telling the stories. Now, you already did some of that, but you did it before I introduced a little bit of what I want to ask you. Right. So what I'm going to ask you is going to be a little different than what you did before, but it might engage with that because your stories are already compelling. You've already got a lot in the way that you just told them as a verbal and oral storyteller. So I want to introduce you to the next concept. In Herstory, because we want to reach that stranger reader and we have the agenda that you just shared of what you wish it would do and what you wish it would make people do or feel or think. You are going to keep that with you while you're writing with us, right? While you're writing with me and talking with me, that's always there inside you. So, for you, it's really close because I feel it and I felt it in the way you told me. And for me, it's really close too. But for all of the writers that come to us, it's not always so obvious how the agenda can drive the writing. So it's something that we pay attention to and think about as we are working together in the workshops. The next concept I want to introduce is called the page one moment. So I want you to visualize a stranger reader. That could be the cop. It could be a mother of someone who's thinking about having their son taken to a mental hospital. It could be someone who's had a trauma in a church unlike yours or like yours. It could be a judge it could be someone who is fearful of people with mental health labels. Okay, so any stranger reader, visualize they're in a bookstore, they're in a library, and they are looking through books, and your book is on the shelf, and they pull your book out and they open to a page. This is the page one moment concept. So they open to the page. Now, what your goal is you want that page to be something that they're not going to be able to put down, right? you know, you want your book to change their life. You want the book to change their mind. But the page one moment is a concept that we use to start and kind of keep starting different parts of our story, because it keeps us minded, or it keeps us geared toward grabbing readerly attention and compelling people to care. Because that's part of the problem. You have a compelling story. You have a story that people should care about. You have already told it in a way that I really care about, but the way we can craft our stories in certain ways that are more likely to get a stranger reader to care, not just a person that already empathizes with you inherently because we have a shared experience. So I'm going to give you a couple of different examples, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what I'm going to ask you to do. So my first page one moment that I started when I was asked this same question, if a stranger reader were to meet you in one moment, this is the one moment that you can take them into in your history, in your life, that is going to compel them, where you're going to start, where that's going to be the page that they can't put down and they keep reading. If you were going to start a story with a moment, I want you to start to think about what that moment would be. So for me, when I first did this exercise, I went to a moment where, and another key part of this is you slow down into the moment, which I'm going to talk to you more and more about, because that's key. You already told me a whole story of your life, right? You gave me the cocktail version, the short version of a very long story. But if you were going to take any one of those moments, maybe it would have been, here was a really profound moment for me in what you shared that I thought would be a great page one moment, was when you were going back to the Kaufman house, that it was no longer the Kaufman house, but it was another house. And you were standing on that porch, or whatever, getting ready to close that door, and you named your names of your friends aloud. And the feeling that came over you, I was like, this is a page one moment, slow down. So the one thing that's going to make it a page one moment and a start to maybe another story, and you can retell your story as many times and as many ways as you want, because remember, your goal is to have the stranger reader now, and maybe in the past it wasn't. So if you were going to take that moment that you gave us, I would say slow down onto that porch. Instead of just telling me I named their names and it was a big moment in my life, and and it profoundly, and I felt healing, slow down and take me there. Was it a dreary day? Was it a sunny day? Were you peaceful all day, or did a sense of peace suddenly come over you? Was it when you closed that and felt that handle on your hand as closing the door, or was it when the door was open and you heard your friends' names echoing aloud through the outdoors? And were you inside the house when you said their names, or were you already outside feeling the liberation of the air on your body, right? I want you to slow down and tell me the full story if that's your page one moment. Maybe your page one moment is on that, I think you said orange shag rug, where you're in the seclusion room, which is basically, I couldn't help but, like a torture chamber in a basement is what I was sort of picturing.
Yeah.
But you kind of gave me the drive-by fast version of it. But what if you went back into that space, and maybe you can do both of these, or you can do anything else, and you told me what you saw. What were you wearing? You said that you had to be in your underwear, or maybe you were totally undressed. Were you around other people? Were you left alone, or was he there? Was it dark and completely in darkness? Were you chained up? Like all of that, what were you feeling? Slow it down. So that would be a page one moment. Now I'll give you some ideas from my own. So my story, when I first did this, the page one moment that I began with was I was following two officers, but I didn't start out by saying that. I sort of said, I said like, I was following two backs in blue shirts into a room that was very bright white light. And I had a feeling of total terror and dread that is very hard to explain, but I was trembling, and I remember like noticing my wrist. I might have tightened my hand around my wrist, and I was very crunched into myself. My shoulders were probably very hiked, and I was probably trying to stop my thighs from shaking. And just that feeling of what terror feels like, that's where I began by describing it. And then the story sort of unfolds, and it's the story of when I was brought. Now I'm breaking out of the telling. Okay. I want you to notice the two versions, right? I'm telling you moment by moment what the backs of their heads were like, right? There are these two white men. They're sort of balding, each of them. They're both short. I'm following them in. I'm trembling. I smell a little bit of the perfume, the amber oil on my arm, and my hands are shaking, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm terrified. I know a feeling that I did something wrong and that I'm very bad and I'm in a great deal of trouble, but I don't know what. So that's the slow version that I want you to do, where you slow down into the moment. But I'm going to break out of that now and tell you a little bit about the larger story that formed out of it. That's where I started with the telling. But the story that formed is about basically me being in a conference room with two cops for 2 hours, telling them my life story before they take me in a cop car to a psychiatric hospital. Okay, so, you know, that I don't, the thing that's gonna, now, if you're my stranger reader and you are a cop or you're a judge or you're whoever, and I tell you, 2 officers, they came and I talked to them for 2 hours and then they brought me into a psych hospital. Isn't that horrible? You're not going to be compelled. You're not, you know, it's just like, oh, and the other thing is biases will start to bias people against me. Oh, you're a criminal? Oh, well, I trust the legal system. Like, I'm not listening to you. And also I haven't garnered their empathy. I haven't gotten them in. But if I show them the fear that I felt and how I was just like a child, and I just kept seeing myself like, why am I bad? You know, what have I done wrong? What's so bad about me? And I show them that, and I show them the terror. They're going to stay with me. And then I take them step by step into the scene. They're going to stay with me and they're going to feel empathy. And maybe I'm going to be Jessica to them instead of just a criminal or a person who's mad, or, you know, a mentally ill person or whatever it is. So the method's sort of based on this way of telling. It could be lots of other moments. So that's the one that I used when I first did it. But if I were going to do some writing, I need another page 1 moment. So maybe it's the morning before I go to see the police. What was I doing that morning? I remember that I was nervous. I woke up nervous. I woke up not feeling quite right, because I had called the police the night before to report a car sitting outside my house. So I was already in a state of, am I being followed? Am I, you know, I'm nervous. Something's going on, a feeling of something's going on, but I don't know what. And my daughters called me, and it was very early in the morning, and I'm groggy. I'm in my pajamas. I'm still in bed, kind of I have the blanket sort of halfway over my head, and I see my daughters' little faces. They're little like 7, 6 and 8-year-old faces, and the FaceTime screens. They're little boxes, and I see my little face in the corner, and it's the 3 of us on the screen, and just, you can't really see much else, just their faces. And I remember smiling and just hearing them talk to me in their little voices. And I remember in the back of my mind thinking, something bad is going to happen, even though I was talking to them and I was like in that safety of that moment with them, and just wanting to be like, okay, everything's gonna be fine, like I always am. I'm giggling, they're giggling, blah blah blah. As soon as I said goodbye to them, and I started kind of frantically looking online because I was getting anxious, and the feeling of how I deal with the anxiety is I'm like searching for information. So that's how I deal with anxiety, and not knowing if something, being worried something's going to happen to me that's bad. So I start looking online for just to search, like, okay, what did I post? Did I post anything problematic that would get me into trouble? I start like reviewing my posts, and then my phone rings, and it's a number. It's the Amherst Police Department. And I see that kind of come across my phone. And then the feeling of dread. Now, I had just called the police the night before, so it's like, but the feeling of dread comes in, and I just buck up. The way that I handle it is brave. Like I just go into professional mode. So I answer the phone. I know my father's downstairs below. He had just asked me, Jess, do you want a donut? I have donuts down here. I'm terrified of my father hearing that I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know why the police are calling me. And I just say hello. So maybe that could be my page 1 moment, right? And I slowed it down to try to show you a little bit more of that, how you would slow it down. Maybe it's sitting in the psychiatric emergency room in one of those plastic sofas, which you can't even call a sofa. It really, I don't know. I need a new word for it. But in one of those sets of plastic chairs that are all one. And it's dark. I haven't slept and I haven't eaten in like 24 hours. And I'm sitting next to an older white man who's balding, and he's telling me about the water being tainted. And he's very worried about the water. And then on the other side of me is a younger teenage age young man who is completely silent, withdrawn, and looking down. And then over on the screen, there's about 40 people in this room. And they're in beds and they're on the floor and they're all over. And over on the screen, they're playing, I see images of like brutal, bloody murders, and in the film The Joker. And I'm thinking, why is a psychiatric emergency room playing the film The Joker, like with murders? And I'm thinking, they're trying to keep all of us here to protect society from us, and yet they're showing films that are glorifying violence. Like, so maybe that's a moment, right? There's lots of different moments that I could do. I could be, it could be when I'm in the hospital room with my roommate, describing, trying to help her clean herself, singing to her, reading books to her. It could be being in that communal room with my sister in the story I told you. So that's just a tapestry of, these are all carceral. Now, the goal of this workshop is to produce carceral narratives. So normally when we're doing a Herstory workshop, we have a sort of theme. So the page one moment, you could do a page one moment that's so profound, has nothing to do with the carceral system, but because we know our agenda is related to this, that's sort of probably where you'd want to go with it. So with that, I don't know if any page one moments have popped into your mind. You could do one of the ones that I mentioned from before, because I certainly want to hear about those, or another moment. If your stranger reader were going to meet you, where would they meet you? What would that moment be? And I like to use a phrase that might be helpful to you to get me into the mode where I'm remembering and I'm in a moment and I'm in the scene. I say, if a stranger reader were going to meet me, or they would find me, and then I'm in my brother's room, right? And then I start there or something like that. And the key here is to slow down. Don't worry about being the great storyteller right now with me, or keeping me like, all I want you to do is try to go back into that space and be there. We call it in Herstory, we call it there-ness instead of about-ness. So about-ness is like, oh my gosh, you need to know what led up. Okay, about-ness was me telling you that the night before, I got that call from the officer after talking to my daughters that I had called the police. That's about-ness, right? If I really wanted to show you that night before, I would show you me sitting outside, sitting at my desk, looking out the window while a car is sitting in front of my house, right? So that would have been there-ness. There-ness would be me with my girls in front of me in the screen, feeling happy, and then 2 seconds later, getting a punch to the gut, and feeling terrified. So if you want to think of a moment to start with, this is the moment. We're going to start with just telling me it, and really trying to go there, because this is what elicits empathy and gets your reader to stay. And then if you meet with me next week, you'll maybe write from after doing this exercise, you'll write, and then we'll come back and you'll share what you've written. That's the kind of idea. Okay. If you're comfortable trying, go for it.
Okay. Let's see. I think I want to try the walking out the door.
Okay.
The house.
Wonderful.
I just walked through and walked. Okay. See, okay. So when you do it this way,
Yes.
how do I? Okay. So I'm in the house. I don't know how to. Okay. Okay. I'm in the house called the House of Horrors. And now it's a beautiful house. It's all painted. Walls have been moved. Floors have been put in. It's all beautiful. The only way I know where the horrors were is by the windows. I'm so glad that I have gotten to go through this house that all I knew was the horror of what happened in this house with my friends. As I have walked through the house, I have actually pictured people like Mark talking about how he's going to be in Joan Jett's band. I hear Barbara telling me, don't get him mad, or telling me that she has a snake in her stomach. I see Stanley watching the Weather Channel, just staring at it. I see Kevin playing the piano. I see James looking at medicines, wondering what pill he might take. Other people are in the back smoking. I'm glad I got to walk through this. I'm glad that they're not here, but they are here. What happened in what used to be the group room still is there, even though it's all painted and different. I think it's time to leave the house now. I asked everyone, my old therapist and my friend who was able to get me to walk through the house, to let me go out of the house last. So they leave, and they leave the door open, and I turn back and I look at what used to be our living room. And I get this idea that I really need to say, let's go, guys. So I grab the door handle and I call out Kevin. I call out Barb. I call out Mark. I call out Lynn. I call out James and Stanley and David, Brad. I tell them it's time to leave. Of course, they're already gone, but not in my mind. And so I grab the handle. I say their names. I tell them it's time to leave. I remember Barb giving me a hard time. And I just tell her, there's no one to give us a hard time anymore. And I see them. It's a sunny day. I just see, I see their faces just floating away. God, I can't say that to a therapist right now. They'll think I'm going mad. I say goodbye to them and I shut the door. There's such a feeling in my shoulders, just like I just took off a heavy coat. And everyone waiting for me on the porch tells me I have a really glowing smile on my face. They asked me if I was ready to go. I made sure that the door was locked. And I said, yeah, let's go.
That's great. That's an amazing page one moment. I'm going to talk to you about structure and why I think it works so well. But how did it feel to you to do the storytelling that way? It puts you in a different space of your story than when we often sit down at the keyboard or with a pen.
Yes, it definitely it definitely felt like I was telling a story, that I was that I was um, that I was just telling anyone, and I could um, for me, I actually have to be back there. I have to be there and really feel those feelings and put them in words and speak them out. And so, yeah, it felt really good.
One of the things that you did in your storytelling there of your page one is you did something that we call at Herstory backstitching. And I think it worked really well, which is why I do like this as a page one moment for you, because you start here and then there's a lot of stories to, like, you haven't, if you start here and your reader doesn't know about the Kaufman House, they want to know, right? So one of the things I would recommend when you write, if you do write this scene, is you refer to it as a haunted house. And I thought that was like, ooh, this is a good way of not telling your reader yet about what happens in the haunted house, but you're back here in this moment of peace. But you could give some visual clues of the haunted house in your piece with the covered up. Now, you said that the way that you could tell that it was the former house, right? That you could see the ghosts of the former house there was through the windows. So I loved that. And I wanted to picture the windows more. Are they lift up and down windows? Or do they open side to side? Do they have crisscross panels across them? What kind of windows are these that you really remembered those windows? And you can connect this later in your story. Maybe there's memories that you have of staring out the window and wanting to leave or whatever it was. Windows represent lots of different things and they're very symbolically rich. So I love that you could do that. If you had any recollections of the wallpapers, I know you were saying that the walls changed and that things were different. If you could give us some of those, even just try to remember in essence, if it was a color that you remember, something like that. Or you don't pay any attention, you can't even remember what you see now, but you remember the haunted walls that were there before. So you're looking through the wallpaper, but all you're seeing is the peach colored paint or whatever it was that you recall from before. Showing us the visuals, I think, will make it more haunting and bring your reader in to that hauntedness. But then you're holding it back because here you are reclaiming your power in the scene and saying, my friends were my comfort. They are what stayed me when I was in this haunted place, this haunted house. They are the ones, and they come into the story. And what you did is this Herstory concept called backstitching, where you start to tell glimpses of other stories, or you kind of go into a pocket of another story and then come back to the present moment of theirs. And you did that with your story of your friends. You had a little anecdote about each friend. So you made them real to us and characters in a story that if you continue on, when we go back in time at some point and we enter into this Kaufman house, maybe into the basement or wherever it was, or into you crouching together with a friend and just having, comfort shoulder to shoulder in a moment where you were being terrified or terrorized. You've got it all laid out in the structure of using this as your beginning, which is different. So you have to think about your stranger reader. They come in here. Now they want to know about what happened in this house, right? There's something bad that happened in this house and you're releasing people, but there's more to the story. Or you begin in another moment where we're already in it, and then you kind of come to this. I like this as the beginning and kind of going back, but what do you think of it structurally? What are you thinking you'll do?
Well, okay. Just to clarify, it wasn't haunted. It was horror. The House of Horrors. Um, I really like the structure. I really like how you explain just telling more.
Yeah.
I think part of what I did just then was like not knowing how much time I had on our Zoom class to know how in depth, or well, not in depth, but for lack of a better word, in depth of things like the windows or like I wanted to say something like, wow, there's a washer and dryer where the seclusion room,
Oh,
uh,
yes.
the shag carpet is now pulled up. There's no more boarded windows. There's still the bathroom, but it's totally, things like that. So I think I'm getting the concept. I do need to just talk real quick about some basic things about the class.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so we would, because I gotta go at 11 my
Okay.
time, okay, which is a few more minutes. Um, so we meet every week.
So right now, because it's a pilot, it's something that we've never done, and we're doing this specifically for this project. We're probably going to do this for 4 weeks
Okay.
as a pilot. So yes, you would meet me, you would meet with me, and if we have other people joining us, they'll join us. And
Okay.
you're working on a piece. So today you started your paging out. You'll get something on paper next week inspired by what you did, verbally today with the paging out. Then you'll share that with me, and we'll work on the piece. Now, because it's just you and me, if it's just the two of us, we can either do a lot more, we can work really like extensively together, or we could have a shorter session and we can kind of just do what you need and kind of keep you going with the piece. The goal is for you to produce a piece of writing. You might want to do a book length thing, so maybe that's your ultimate goal. And then I would say, because I run the other workshop on Wednesdays, if this workshop stops after the pilot, I would ask you to come and join us over at that workshop. It's free. It's every week. We're there every week. If you can come. If you can't make it, skip a week. We're always there usually. And so because we're already a community of writers that are writing on similar subjects, it's the same method. It's a little slightly different focus, and we're not recording it. So, so,
Yeah.
you
And
and
just
I,
to let you know,
yes.
when I mention those names, it's okay.
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 All right. Yes, that is good.
No lawyers are going to come after you.
I know, and I think you only use first names too, so it's
Yeah.
pretty protected. But
Yeah.
we would love to have you join us at our Wednesday workshop. After we do this pilot and do our recorded sessions for a couple more until you and I, it might even just be next week that you and I meet, and then maybe and then we record one more, and we help Herstory out with a little bit of that, and then maybe you want to just join in. I don't know if the time works for you on Wednesdays. It's Eastern Standard Time, 4:30 to 6:30 on Wednesdays.
So that would be 3:30.
Or 2 hours?
Because well, right now I'm in Mountain Time.
Oh,
but
Mountain Time, so it's 2 hours.
I live in Wichita, so I'm in Central Time. I'm here in Colorado visiting, so that's
okay.
That's why this time. But yes, I want to continue to do this. I just have to cut this meeting short.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
But I love doing this. One question I have.
Yes.
So during the week, until the next meeting, I am writing like my okay.
Yes.
And do I send that to you before class, or do I?
So you don't need to send. Yes, you can. So if you join our bigger group, there are a couple people who have some issues with auditory processing or various things, and they ask that people send the hard copies. But in general, I'm one of the people that ask for a hard copy. I don't actually usually have it in front of me when I listen to you and I look at your face while you're reading, or I'm taking notes. But I still ask you to send it to me. I just kind of like having it, maybe later I'll look at it and I'll think of something else that I can give as possible helpful feedback. So yes, you can send it to me right before the meeting, even after the meeting is okay. It is helpful if you do send whatever your progress is to me.
Okay.
And then, you're working on, hopefully what Janelle said earlier is that Herstory would love to have a finished piece based on your page one moment for to be able to share. But if this is part of your larger work, then you just keep joining our other workshop, and maybe it's just a chapter and you submit the chapter to Herstory, but then you write the larger work and publish the book,
Right.
you know? And we talk
Right.
about publishing sometimes during our meetings, and you know, it's a great group. I'm very excited if you're able to make it. I'm very excited for you to join that group.
Yeah.
I also love and am so grateful that you've been willing to work with me and be part
Yeah,
of
I
project.
love this, and I think it's the answer to what I've needed. Because I yeah, if you have a chance to look at my first book,
I
you
will.
can see
Yeah.
that it's very simple. I think it's on Kindle,
Okay.
and I think it's free. I'm
Okay.
not sure. We don't have it in Audible. But
Okay.
it's on Amazon. That's all I know.
Okay, yes, I teach. I don't teach literature and madness, although I would love to. But I teach courses. I'm teaching a course at both University of Buffalo and at a local prison through Bard Prison Initiative, which I'm part of. And it's on well, one is called The Politics of Health, and the other one is Women in Health Problems and Practices. So narratives like yours are certainly ones that I would look to for possible future inclusion in my courses. So
Yeah.
yes, that's wonderful.
All
Thank you.
right. All right. Well, I need to go. I'm sorry to cut
Oh,
this
that's
short.
okay. That's all good. We've
Yeah.
spent a lot of time together, and it's
Yes.
been wonderful to get to know you, and I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you next week.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Nancy, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.